blade struck for the 7th time. March 11th, 1945. Sing Sing Prison. D Block Corridor. 2:17 p.m. Bumpy Johnson lay on the ground, blood spreading across the concrete like spilled paint. 3 Italian inmates stood over him: Tony, the Blade, Marquez, Vincent Callow, and Sal Romano. All were breathing hard. All held shivs they had sharpened for weeks in the machine shop. 7 stab wounds, abdomen, chest, back, lung, each placed to kill. The corridor fell silent. 60 inmates watched from their cells. Guards ran toward the scene, whistles blowing. For one frozen moment, everyone stared at Bumpy Johnson, lying in a pool of his own blood, his prison uniform soaked through, his breathing shallow and wet. Tony leaned down and whispered in Bumpy's ear, "Luciano sends his regards. Harlem's ours now." Bumpy's eyes were open. He was still conscious. His lips moved, trying to form words, but only blood came out. He coughed a wet, gurgling sound that made even hardened criminals turn away. Tony laughed, stood up, and wiped his shiv on his prison pants. "He's done. Let's go." The 3 Italians walked away, calm and confident. They had just killed Harlem's king in front of 60 witnesses. The guards reached Bumpy. One checked his pulse, hands shaking. "He's still breathing. Get the doctor now." They carried Bumpy to the infirmary on a stretcher. His blood left a trail down the corridor. The prison doctor examined him and shook his head. 7 wounds. Two vital organs. Punctured lung. He's lost at least 3 pints of blood. He looked at the warden. "I'll try, but he's got maybe 6 hours 8, if he's lucky." That night, Tony, Vincent, and Romano celebrated in their cells. They passed around contraband whiskey and laughed about how easy it had been. They had 72 hours before they understood their mistake, because Bumpy Johnson didn't the end the 3 men who tried to kill him were about to wish they had succeeded in killing themselves. Instead, to understand what happened next, you need to know who these men were. Tony the Blade Marquez was the leader, 34 years old, a made man in the Luciano family, serving 15 years for armed robbery. Inside Sing Sing, Tony was royalty protected and feared. He had killed 2 men in prison, both ruled self-defense, 'cause the Italian mob controlled enough guards to make sure Tony's story was always believed. Vincent Callow was the muscle, 6'3", 240 pounds, former boxer, serving 20 years for manslaughter. In 3 years inside, Vincent had sent 7 men to Sing Sing's infirmary. Nobody challenged Vincent S. Romano was the quiet one, the reliable one, serving 12 years for extortion. He worked in the laundry, kept his head down, followed orders. When Tony and Vincent needed a 3rd man they could trust, Romano was the obvious choice. These were not random criminals. They were professional killers, and they had stabbed Bumpy Johnson 7 times with surgical precision. They made one critical mistake. They assumed 7 stabs would be enough. Bumpy had been walking from the library back to his cell at 2:15 p.m. shift change. The corridor was full of inmates and no guards. Tony stepped out. Vincent and Romano flanked him. 3 men blocked Bumpy's path. No one helped. This was prison justice. "You know why we're here?" Tony said, pulling out his shiv. Bumpy's voice was calm. "Luciano's scared of a man in a cage. Luciano's smart. You're a problem, so we're solving it." They gave Bumpy no chance to fight back. Vincent grabbed him from behind. Romano came from the side. Tony went for the kill. First stabbed abdomen, 2nd chest, 3rd back, between the ribs. Bumpy dropped to his knees. 4th shoulder, 5th side, 6th back, again. Bumpy collapsed forward onto the concrete. Tony leaned down and drove the 7th, laid into Bumpy's back, angled toward the lung. "Harlem's ours now." he whispered. Then they walked away. Dr. Harrison worked on Bumpy for 3 hours, stitching wounds and stopping what bleeding he could. He should be dead already, Dr. Harrison told the warden, but he won't last the night. They moved Bumpy to the hospital wing. Hour 1, unconscious. Breathing labored, skin gray. Hour 6, still unconscious. Dr. Harrison checked, expecting a corpse. The heart was still beating. Hour 12, Bumpy opened his eyes. He couldn't speak, but he was conscious. Hour 24, Bumpy Johnson was still alive. Tony was getting nervous. He had heard Bumpy was still breathing, but he reassured himself. 7 stab wounds, a punctured lung. The doctor said he would die. Vincent and S weren't worried. They were protected by Italian mob power. They had no idea what was coming. What they didn't understand about Bumpy Johnson was this: being weak and looking weak are two very different things. Bumpy lay in that hospital bed, barely able to breathe, but his mind was working. And in Sing Sing, Bumpy had something the Italians didn't respect from the invisible people: the black porters, the kitchen workers, the laundry workers, the janitors. Bumpy had spent 18 months treating them like human beings. Now, lying in that hospital bed, he called in those debts. A porter named James visited Bumpy at hour 36. Bumpy whispered something. James nodded and left. Vincent was walking down the metal stairs from the 3rd tier. Normal routine. He had done it 1,000 times. But this time, as he reached the middle of the staircase, his foot hit something. Industrial grease spread across 3 steps. It's visible unless you were looking for it. Vincent's feet went out from under him. He tumbled down 20 metal stairs. His body struck every single step back, head, spine slamming into steel edges. The sound echoed through the entire cell block. Then silence. Then Vincent started screaming. Guards rushed over. Vincent lay at the bottom of the stairs, his legs bent at the wrong angles. Worse, he couldn't feel them. I can't feel my legs. I can't feel my legs. The prison doctor arrived and examined him. His face went pale. Spinal cord damage. Severe. He's paralyzed from the waist down. Vincent kept screaming. Fix it. Fix it. I can't, the doctor said quietly. The damage is permanent. You'll never walk again. Vincent Callow, 6'3", 240 pounds of muscle, former boxer. The man who had put 7 inmates in the hospital would spend the rest of his life in a wheelchair in prison. A wheelchair meant vulnerability, helplessness. You couldn't run, couldn't fight, couldn't defend yourself. A life sentence inside a life sentence. S was working his shift in the prison laundry, operating the industrial presser, massive machine that flattened prison uniforms. He was being careful. He had used the machine for 8 months without incident. This time, as he fed a sheet through the rollers, his hand got caught. Not accidentally. A laundry worker named Marcus had disabled the safety release. When S's hand went in, the machine didn't stop. The rollers crushed his hand. The sound of breaking bones cut through the grinding machine. S screamed. Guards shut down the press and pulled his mangled hand free. Every finger was crushed beyond recognition, bone fragments, pulverized flesh. Dr. Harrison examined it in the infirmary and shook his head. The damage is too severe. We need to amputate just the hand. S asked, his voice shaking. I'll try. But if infection sets in, he didn't finish. 3 days later, the infection spread. Gangrene, black flesh creeping up. S's arm, despite antibiotics. Dr. Harrison had no choice. He amputated S's entire right arm at the shoulder. S. Romano woke up from surgery with one arm. In prison wear, you needed 2 hands to defend yourself, to work, to eat. To survive, a one-armed man in Sing Sing was helpless, at the mercy of everyone around. Tony was eating breakfast in the mess hall. Oatmeal, the same thing every morning. This morning, as he swallowed, Something went wrong. The oatmeal went down the wrong pipe. Tony started choking, gasping, his face turning red then purple. Guards rushed over and performed the Heimlich once, twice, 3 times. Nothing worked. Tony collapsed to his knees, clawing at his throat, his eyes bulging. A guard tried again 4 times, 5 times. Finally, the blockage cleared. Tony gasped, sucked in air, and collapsed. His heart had stopped. "Get the doctor." Dr. Harrison arrived, running, and began CPR compressions. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes without oxygen. Finally, Tony's heart restarted. He was breathing. His eyes were open but empty, staring at nothing. Dr. Harrison checked his pupils, then his responses. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no." The warden arrived. "Is he alive?" "His body is alive," Dr. Harrison said quietly. "But his brain, he went without oxygen for 4 minutes. That's too long." He couldn't finish. Tony Marquez was breathing. His heart was beating. But nobody was home. Brain death. Permanent vegetative state. Tony's eyes were open, but he couldn't see. His mouth moved, but he couldn't speak. He couldn't think, couldn't understand, couldn't do anything except breathe and stare. They put him in a wheelchair, fed him through a tube, changed his clothes when he soiled himself. Every day, they wheeled him into the mess hall for meals. Every inmate in Sing Sing saw him. Tony the Blade Marquez, the man who had killed Bumpy Johnson, sitting in a wheelchair, drool running down his chin, eyes vacant and empty, a living corpse. A reminder of what happens when you stab Bumpy Johnson and don't finish the job. Hour 72. Warden Miller walked into the hospital wing. Bumpy Johnson was sitting up in bed, reading, still bandaged, but alive. "Johnson," the warden said, "I need to talk to you." Toby looked up. 3 men. The same 3 who stabbed you. Vincent Calla paralyzed for life. Sal Romano lost his entire arm. Tony Marquez brain dead. A vegetable. All within 72 hours. "That's terrible," Bumpy said. "Prison's a dangerous place. You did this. I've been in this bed for 3 days, dying. Remember? I know you did this. I can't prove it, but I know." Bumpy set down his book. "Warden, let me tell you something. Those 3 men stabbed me 7 times. They tried to kill me. They almost did." He paused. "And you know what the worst part was? Not the pain, not the blood. The worst part was lying on that floor, bleeding out, knowing they thought they'd won." He paused again. "But they made a mistake. They assumed 7 stabs was enough. They assumed I'd die. They assumed wrong, okay? Now, Vincent will never walk again. Sal will never use his right arm again. And Tony's body is alive, but Tony is gone forever. He's a vegetable. He'll spend the rest of his life in a wheelchair, drooling, staring at nothing, while everyone who sees him remembers what happens when you try to kill someone and fail." The warden stared. "You destroyed 3 men. "I didn't do anything," Bumpy said quietly. "But if I had, I'd say this. They tried to take my life. I didn't take theirs. I took something worse. I took their dignity, their strength, their future. Death would have been mercy. What they got, that's justice. This ends here, Johnson." It already ended, Warden. 3 days ago. Tony Marquez lived for 17 more years. Every single day in a wheelchair. Every single day fed through a tube. Every single day staring at nothing with empty eyes. Inmates passed him in the mess hall and whispered, "That's what happens when you touch Bumpy Johnson." Vincent Callow served his full sentence 20 years in a wheelchair. He never walked again. Released in 1965, dependent on his family for everything, bitter and broken. Sal Romano learned to function with 1 arm. He got out in 1953, tried to find work, couldn't. Most jobs required 2 hands. He ended up on the streets, begging. and died from exposure in 1958. The story spread through every prison in America. Don't try to kill someone unless you're sure the job is finished. Because if they survive, they won't just kill you. They'll do something worse. They'll make you wish you were dead. Bumpy Johnson was released from Sing Sing in 1947. He walked out on his own 2 feet and returned to Harlem. Years later, someone asked him about the stabbing. 7 times, Bumpy said quietly. They stabbed me 7 times. And you know what? If they'd stabbed me 8, I probably would have died. But they stopped at 7. And that was their mistake. What happened to them was brutal, the interviewer said. What they did to me was brutal, Bumpy replied. I just made sure the punishment fit the crime. 7 stabs. 3 destroyed lives. That's not revenge. That's mathematics. In Sing Sing, they still tell the story. They still wheel Tony's wheelchair past the cells during meals. They still use Vincent and Sal as cautionary tales. The lesson is simple. You can stab Bumpy Johnson 7 times, but unless the 7th one stops his heart, he's going to wake up. And when he does, you won't die. You'll wish you had. If this story hit you, smash that subscribe button. We're telling Bumpy Johnson stories about real consequences, about justice that's worse than death, about the difference between mercy and revenge. Drop a comment. Was this justice, or did Bumpy go too far? Hit that notification bell, because next week the story of how Bumpy stopped Malcolm X's assassination with a single look. No words, just one look that made for Hitmen walk away. Remember, Harlem didn't need superheroes. They had Bumpy Johnson. And Bumpy taught the world that sometimes letting someone live is the cruelest punishment